Today, the top brass assembled to brief India and the world about the biggest takeaways from Operation Sindoor, listed the outcomes, mentioned the intent, and also detailed evidence of each and every statement that they had made. India asserted, our aim was to hit terror and defense targets, not to count body bags. But in a conflict situation, losses are bound to happen.
The Pakistan Army has reported to have lost approximately 35 to 40 personnel in artillery and small arms firing on the line of control between the 7th and the 10th of May.
Have we achieved our objective of decimating that terrorist camp? And the answer is a thumping yes. And the results are for the whole world to see. All I can say is that we have achieved our objectives that we selected, and all our pilots are back home.
Our forces remained forward deployed in the Northern Arabian Sea in a dissuasive and deterrent posture with full readiness and capacity to strike select targets at sea and on land, including Karachi at time of our choosing. The forward deployment of the Indian Navy compelled Pakistani naval and air units to be in a defensive posture.
The message from every quarter is loud and clear. Terror hit-and-run operations cannot be Pakistan's standard operating procedure. India has just raised the cost of pushing cross-border terror, and with the tolerance threshold now being redefined, remember, India has said that any act of terror from now on will be equivalent to an act of war. The terms of engagement have completely changed. Then there is also the role that has been played by secondary stakeholders, the likes of US and China and perhaps Islamic nations, in the way they have spoken out or not about this ongoing conflict. We've made it clear that India neither wants nor needs mediation. But what does Trump's stand in this matter actually mean? There are several questions that are being raised. We know for sure that Operation Sindoor has been successful. We've been told that by our topmost men in uniform, as well as political echelons, people sitting in the positions of power. But is there something more that could have been achieved? The questions that might be uncomfortable, but need to be asked. And to answer those questions, I'm now joined on the broadcast by Mr. Brahmachalani. He's a strategic affairs expert and has also been asking those questions. And Pathik Ritten, he's a geopolitical analyst. Welcome, gentlemen, to this broadcast. First question that everybody asked yesterday when that announcement came, and we saw evidence of how we had managed to inflict very severe damage on Pakistan. Mr. Brahmachalani, why did India then agree for a halt?
Why did India agree to a halt? Is that the question?
Yes, sir.
Well, that's the question the nation is asking. That's the question the nation wants to know. Why abruptly, when we had the upper hand militarily, as today's briefing by the military officers underlined, why we did not press home that advantage? Why did we terminate an operation after just 3 days? And why did we yield to US pressure? The US is a friend of India, a close friend of India, and our partnership with the US is very vital to our economic and strategic interests. And we have an India-friendly administration in Washington. I can understand the Americans, they're seeking to push American interests in South Asia. But why did we yield to pressure from a friend? According to American media, and this is not one newspaper or one channel, all are reporting across that the breakthrough came when J.D. Vance called Modi. J.D. Vance is a friend of India. He's married to an Indian American. He's the guy who said a day earlier, before he called Modi, that this conflict is none of America's business. Yet a day later, he persuaded Modi to agree to a ceasefire, according to US media accounts. The question the nation is asking, that when things were going in our favor, when we had the military momentum, why did we stop after just 3 days? Because in modern military history, no military mission has accomplished anything in 3 days. Even if you are a superpower, you conduct an extended operation in order to achieve some objective. Here, after 3 days, we suddenly decided to terminate that operation, raising many questions. If our intent was only to mount an offensive for 3 days, we would have been better off, Priya, by just exerting sustained military pressure on Pakistan on a continuing basis. That is, we should have chosen non-kinetic options instead of employing the military option. When you employ the military option, when you give the military a task, that task needs to be completed. You can't leave a task incomplete. When history is written, how will history view Operation Sindoor? Will it view Operation Sindoor as a turning point that changed Pakistan's behavior? Or will it view Operation Sindoor as belonging to the same category as 2016 surgical strikes and the 2019 Balakot airstrike, even though Operation Sindoor militarily was on a much larger scale and a more extensive scale. Okay. Yet, Priya, any military operation is viewed ultimately by its outcome. And the question we need to ask ourselves, did Operation Sindoor reach a definitive outcome?
So the government, sir, is saying that the operation, and the army saying, the forces are saying that the operation is ongoing. But Pathikrit Pain, would you like to answer that question? Has Operation Sindoor achieved its objective for India to decide to put it on hold?
Good evening, Priya. A small correction. It's Pain, not Pain.
Sorry, sir.
But
my apologies. My sincere apologies.
So let me tell you one thing. Brahmaji, whom I deeply respect, if you look at from the perspective of 2611, I mean, 15 years back, would anybody have thought that we would have reached a day when we could completely decimate the headquarters of Lashkar-e-Taiba and Jaish-e-Mohammed? Would even in 2016 or 2019, would anybody have thought that we could just randomly destroy some of the top air bases of Pakistan, including the Noor Khan base, which is the most critically strategic one next to their nuclear command authority? So we have literally told them that we can reach you anywhere, anytime. For almost 90 minutes, I think the Indian Air Force was literally toying around with the airspace of Pakistan. Now, if you look at it, let me put it this way. There would always be this question, and I agree with Brahmaji, if the armed forces should have been given 2 more days to do a little more, you should have decimated that Karachi port or the naval base, and you could have, made them, if they had come with folded hands, you should have made them, put them on their knees or crawl literally for, a ceasefire. That is always a critical question. And let me tell you, nobody would face more challenge than the ruling dispensation to sell the idea or to convince his own voters, because the country itself has been looking for a final solution. But for any kind of kinetic conflict in today's era, taking the decision to take a step back is always a very strategic and a challenging one. There would be questions. I am not here to defend. There would be questions. But what was the actual strategic objective? That you can't keep on bluffing, that you would do terror attacks and I can't reach you. You can't keep on bluffing that you would do tactical tactical ballistic missiles and I'll just remain silent. It took me just 1.5 hours to show you a place. So the asymmetry between India and Pakistan has been shown to them. Now, does it mean that it stops terrorism? No. Does it mean Operation Sindoor is over? No. Does it mean there will be no more terrorism? Absolutely not. It would definitely happen. And I think we have to wait for that day. But if you look at the situation in case of Russia-Ukraine or even the Israel war, they have been entangled in a war for 3 years, even without a solution and a permanent,
And let me interject you there, Pathikrit Pai, because the difference between Russia, Ukraine, Israel, Hamas is also that in this case, both India and Pakistan are nuclear-enabled countries, and which perhaps changes the dynamics completely. And let me get Mr. Chilani in on that. Sir, given that situation and that India on multiple occasions, Prime Minister Modi has said this is not an era of war, this perhaps was the best way out?
First, I agree with my friend, whatever he has said. The nation is seeking answers to fundamental questions. The government should answer. Why did it yield to US persuasion? Why did it abruptly end an operation, taking its own cabinet members by surprise? These are legitimate questions. We are not challenging what the military is saying. We are asking questions that are fundamental to India's national interests. When you undertake an operation, you obviously factor in all things, including risks and the costs you're willing to bear. You don't launch an operation without considering all that. You also factor in that you will come under international pressure. Now, what is the outcome, Priya, of Operation Sindoor? Let's be frank. Our core issue.
So I'm just holding you there. We'll come. Please resume your line of thought. But just for our viewers, let me tell what the government sources have been saying has been achieved. So they are saying that when it comes to military objective, we had said that we are going to demolish their terror dens. We have attacked their terror infra. Then political objective, we still haven't withdrawn the hold on Indus water treaties. Then when it comes to a psychological objective, we have hit deeper, like was highlighted. We've gone deeper inside Pakistan than we had earlier when it was Pulwama or before that. Something that even people in Pakistan have been highlighting, sir, that, probably the strike right next to Noor Khan was what turned the tide in favor of a ceasefire. Please continue.
Well, I agree with you, Priya. The government should have answered these questions. Instead, it fielded 4 senior military officers to describe the military operations. The political questions are more important because the military is given a task and given objectives that are defined by the political leadership. As far as taking out terrorist camps is concerned, let's be clear on one thing. Pakistan's military regards its terrorist proxies as expendable. They are cannon fodder for the military generals. Pakistan is the world's largest terror factory. They churn out hundreds of more jihadi terrorists. We killed 100 plus, according to this evening's briefing. They will churn out hundreds more. There's an extensive madrasa network in Pakistan that they can rely upon. So killing terrorists, destroying terror camps without inflicting pain on the puppeteers. If we target the puppets and we let the puppeteers escape scot-free, then we will not be able to end a 4-decade-long war that employs terrorist proxies. So let's be clear on one thing. It's not the number of terror camps we hit or the number of terrorists we kill. The question that we need to ask is that, did we inflict sufficient pain on the Pakistan military so that we have created some sort of deterrence against further cross-border attacks? Now, if you look at how it is being viewed in Pakistan, it's very important, Priya, because we have to look at both sides. In Pakistan, they're celebrating this ceasefire, starting with Prime Minister Sharif, as Pakistan's victory over India. We should have ended the campaign on a note where a humiliated Pakistan military face the wrath of the Pakistani people whom they have oppressed since the country's creation. We could have used all the military power that we had in a short, decisive campaign. I'm not talking about a long campaign. I'm talking of a short, swift, decisive campaign that would have meant India bringing a superior military power to bear on Pakistan in a way to impose high punitive costs. Instead, we gave a face-saving exit to General Asim Munir and company. Now look, what we did. We had overwhelming power in the naval domain. We didn't employ our naval power. We gained dominance in the air by degrading Pakistan's air defenses. Pakistan's air defenses proved much weaker than Pakistan had anticipated. Now, if you look at the satellite imagery of this Rawalpindi Air Base, which is the crown jewel of the Pakistani Air Force, we only destroyed a part of that air base. We should have gone back to destroy the remaining air base because they can rebuild that portion that has been destroyed in a few months, maybe in a few weeks. So the objective should have been to impose such costs on the Pak military that they would think twice before seeking to continue to wage this war of 1,000 cuts against India.
Okay, so Pathik, 2 points there. First, that India gave in to Trump's pressure, to US's pressure. And second, the off-ramp that everybody has been talking about, perhaps the timing wasn't right.
So Priya, first and foremost, I'm not much bothered about what the Pakistanis are celebrating about because they still celebrate the 1971 war thinking they have won, even though their 90,000, 93,000 soldiers surrendered with their pants down, apologies, and they lost half of their territory. So that's how Pakistanis actually see their narrative when they even lose entirely. Secondly, I still believe there is a problem with the strategic communication. And that is one area a lot of improvement has to be done. I don't think at any point of time, the intention of the government was to put in soldiers into Pakistan, occupy the country, govern the country, because it's a totally non-governable area. It's a malignant tumor. Was the objective to entirely decimate Pakistan and get into a prolonged war? Well, I'm not sure. I don't know. I don't think so. Even the Americans went into Afghanistan for 20 years, did not achieve much. All I'm saying is this: yes, there would always be this question as to whether you could have given probably 2 more days. If you could have used your armed force in the Navy, because if you look at the kind of destroyers and everything else that was deployed, they're armed to the teeth with BrahMos. That is always that question as to whether it was the right time or not. But I still believe more than anyone else, it is the government which knows that it would have to convince their own people, voters. So I think the honest
so then Mr. Chilani is asking, why didn't the government come out and address those questions right now? Why was
that
it
is one thing. So there is a strategic communication, there is a strategic objective, and there's a political communication. We have to wait for that. And I still believe this is a mere temporary cause so far as this conflict is concerned. Pakistan would give you opportunities again very soon. And I'm very sure about that. God forbid, but it is going to happen. Secondly, when it comes to the non-kinetic option, that is there. Indus Water Treaty will create havoc, the suspension of that. Third, please understand one thing. When it comes to other factors of what all things India would do, I think none of those things have been stopped. India has made it very clear that any act of war, any act of terror would be declared as an act of war. So we have to just wait. It is very challenging. If you look at day before yesterday, the political index of the government was at its peak, and in the last 24 hours, it had been a lot of questions. So more than anyone else, I think the government itself is concerned as to how to address that issue. Whether enough has been done, well, give me 10 more seconds.
Yes,
I'm not much bothered about the nuclear thing. If you can take care of a short-range ballistic missile like the Hataf or a Fatah that was aimed at us, you can take care of anything. Your entire air defense network has worked splendidly, 10 times better than the Iron Dome of Israel. There is this question the government would be asked, but I think somewhere the military wanted to tell the Pakistanis, you are not safe anywhere, even in your deepest of holes. And that is a message that has been adequately given as per what I could understand from the DGMO press conference. But after that, I still believe a lot more is left to be done so far as this operation is concerned. It's only a matter of time. I still believe it's a temporary thought. And I think let's wait for some time what happens. The government, in all its wisdom, took a decision to presume that it was entirely under pressure of United States. Well, we have to wait and watch. And I don't think India will ever allow Trump to control the terms or dictate the terms so far as Kashmir is concerned. Trump has a foot-in-the-mouth syndrome, no disrespect to the position of the President of the United States, but I don't think they will achieve it. Let's see what happens. But this war is far from over, and I think India is prepared for the next level. Operation Sindoor has not been called off. This is what I want to say.
That the government has also been emphasizing, and we heard men in uniform as well. But Mr. Chilani, had we not heard from the men in uniform today, and instead it were, let's say, a government minister who would have been speaking to us about this, wouldn't the government in that case have been accused of trying to score political points?
Well, what did this evening's military briefing reveal? It revealed that we killed about 35 to 40 Pakistani soldiers. We damaged several of their airfields. We managed to penetrate air defenses extensively from Sakkar in Sindh all the way to Rawalpindi. All that is very good, and it was known that we had actually done extensive damage to select military targets in Pakistan. But frankly, and we need to ask ourselves, killing 35 to 40 Pakistani soldiers, damaging some of their airfields, will deter General Munir and his fellow generals from continuing to wage proxy warfare against India.
But sir, even full-fledged wars have not really given a solution to anyone. Israel fought its 7-day war. You know, there can be several other examples between India and Pakistan itself. So how do we know what is the final solution? No,
nobody's for a final solution.
But then the cost of a war also is something that perhaps we would have considered.
I'm not advocating that India should have gone for an all-out war. Between a 3-day military operation and a full-fledged war, there are 100 different options. In India, this is the problem. You talk about not turning your cheek and people say, oh, are you for an all-out war? People don't understand that there are 100 different options between allowing a country to do something with impunity and waging war against that country. 3-day offensive, as I explained earlier, 3-day military campaign in history has never achieved enduring results. I, for one, believe, and I said it earlier, that non-military options would have helped India better. Look at what we have, what has been the outcome of Operation Sindoor. Instead of the core issue, Pakistan's cross-border terrorism, gaining international attention, Operation Sindoor was designed to open the eyes of the world to Pakistan's trans-border terrorism. Instead, the international spotlight now is on Kashmir as the core issue. Look at what Trump is saying. Look at what the West Indies are saying. Look at what the G7 foreign minister statement says. There is no mention of Pakistan's cross-border terrorism. This isn't the outcome that we wanted. Also, don't forget, there is now rehyphenation of India and Pakistan. A false equivalency is being drawn between the victim of cross-border terror and the perpetrator.
Right. Patikrit, India has lost more than it gained.
No. Let me tell you, I mean, there would be certain noises that would be made by the West. They will try to sort out their own sports with us because we did not support them for the Russia adventure. But let me put it this way. I just want to, I understand what Brahmaji is mentioning, talking about. And I, to a certain extent, agree that your response should never be calibrated and measured. I believe response has to be disproportionately high and preemptive so that, it completely overwhelms. I think to a certain extent it has been achieved. Look, destruction of air defense system is not just about doing a mere damage to one asset. It also means that your tanks cannot come out. It also means that your vehicles cannot move around easily because you can be targeted anywhere. And that is, I think, the messaging that India wanted to do, at least in phase 1. There is going to be a phase 2 very soon. Let me put it. And the thing, there is a huge difference, and the asymmetry part comes in here. I think it was merely a demonstration of what India wanted. I'm not advocating for the government. I'm saying what they perhaps wanted to do. This was the time, unlike in case of Balakot, it is known to everybody that most of the time, this time, our aircrafts did not even need to cross the international border because you had such long-range missiles, you could use it from this side, and it actually had a precision pinpointed, destination to reach, and it reached. So if it is about occupying Pakistan, well, that was not the objective. If it is about completely dismantling, I don't think as of yet today that was the objective. If it is about telling you you can't hide anywhere, I can see you anywhere. 2 of the fighter jets of Pakistan just crashed merely after taking off from Sargodha, which means that's the level of range the S-400 and the Akash Tir controlled air defense network today you have. Okay. That is a demonstration. The next phase, I don't think anybody would care about what the Americans say. This time also we are speaking a little more. And you would always see certain noises from G7 because we have actually cared 2 hoots about them when they asked us to stop taking Russian oil.
Yes, but there are stakeholders that we do care about, like Trump and China. It's interesting we talk about phase 2. We take a very quick breather. So just a 1-minute breather, and then we'll come back and we'll discuss about what is phase 2. Is it going to be Operation Sindoor 2.0? Now that we've been told that India and Pakistan are going to sit on the talks table, what really is going to be on that table and what is off the table, especially when we have said that our tolerance threshold has changed from now on. We'll discuss all those aspects and more in just a minute from now. Is being spoken about. We have spoken about it a lot. Do you think today, with India coming out and saying that we neither need nor want mediation, from here on things are going to change when it comes to negotiations or interference?
First, Priya, let me begin with the bigger picture. There's a saying, success has 1,000 fathers, but failure is an orphan. So
ceasefire violation happened very quickly for Trump to claim that he was the father of that successful ceasefire.
Well, success brings international respect. The winner's narrative gains currency. But when a military campaign is a draw or ends without a definitive outcome, the pairing of the 2 sides begins internationally. This is what we are facing today. Trump ignores the core issue, the issue that triggered the military hostilities, Pakistan's asymmetric warfare through terrorist proxies, and he, playing into Pakistan's hands, he says he will work with both countries to arrive at a Kashmir solution. In other words, he's seeking to advance Pakistan's long-standing agenda. And the paradox is that Trump has long been a friend of India. In his first term, Trump cut off US security aid to Pakistan because Pakistan, he said, was in bed with terrorists. In his first term, he also backed India against Chinese aggression in Doklam and in Ladakh. So he is a man who has been India-friendly. But because we did not take Operation Sindoor to its logical conclusion, we are seeing the resurrection of the Kashmir issue internationally, not just Trump and the Western leaders, in the international media. Look up any international media outlet. They're all harping on Kashmir as the core issue, the reason why this conflict began. That's, our narrative is not being carried by any outlet. The reason is we did not take our campaign to its logical conclusion.
Pathikrit, has, according to, as Mr. Chilani says, victor's narrative is gaining currency, and in this case, it looks like Pakistan might have an upper hand?
Let me put it this way. To a certain extent, I agree with Brahmaji in one thing. If you look at the military operation, it has been spectacular, and I think we have completely exposed the uselessness of Chinese hardware. Even the Americans would have to justify as to why their equipment also failed against India's air defense system or India's penetration right inside Pakistan. But the problem of India for a long time has been its strategic communication. If you look at the press conferences, except for the one that happened today, for the last 3 days, our press conferences have been very defensive. I'm sorry to say this, I strongly respect the government of India, but somewhere the press conferences were not offensive in nature. We have to understand the importance of information warfare in today's era, which is as important as the kinetic war. And if you look at how, even during the Palakot strike, the fact that we use thermobaric bombs, which have very little collateral damage, which gets inside and creates reflective shock waves at a temperature of 1500 degrees Celsius, because it doesn't contain shrapnels or splinters, and it literally vaporizes everybody. The Pakistanis sold a different narrative to the Western media that only 2 crores died, and the Western media got it because the Western media has an interest in ensuring that we get hyphenated, we get bracketed with the Pakistanis. And you have to live with this. We can't say that the Pakistanis and the West will stop doing it because they have an interest. And as you become a $4 trillion economy, which we are, you will face it more. The solution is not that we keep on arguing with them. The solution is, along with the kinetic offenses, along with everything else that we have decided we will do, whether it is Indus water treaty, on which probably tomorrow the Americans will do pressure as well, give pressure. The issue is your strategic communication. When the external affairs minister, the foreign secretary comes, you can't just have reading out something without understanding that the war is also being played out in the digital media, in the YouTube, in the WhatsApp, and everywhere else in the social media. So your communication when it comes to telling the world that this is what has happened, this is what I did, this was my objective, and I have achieved it, that is where I think a lot has to be done. And I think once you achieve that, maybe diplomatically we are done far better than Pakistan.
Could you exemplify that? Like, what exactly can be done that is not being done right now?
If you look at the kind of disinformation Pakistan played out from day one, they have shot 5 fighter jets.
But we must think that. In fact, the army has set up a separate unit.
The rebuttal came today. Number 2, the kind of investment Pakistanis have done in having their journalists in the Western newspapers. Everywhere you would see people either sympathizing with Pakistan. You have heard about a person called Ghulam Nabi Fai. That guy was working for ISI. He was implicated and indicted by FBI eventually. He was having conferences for decades in the United States telling the Kashmir issue. We have done a lot in the last 5 years in terms of communication, but strategic communication, you have to be a first mover. That is where I think a lot we have to do more.
So, Mr. Chilani, do you think that this is one of the non-kinetic options that India should have exercised and has failed, which perhaps... and also let me bring in the question of this whole IMF loan being sanctioned for Pakistan at such a crucial juncture. Is that a failure of India, or was that just a procedural thing that was bound to happen whether or not Pahalgam and its retaliation took place?
What happened 2 days ago was that the IMF board approved a staff agreement with Pakistan to release $2.3 billion additional bailout. But this staff agreement was reached before Trump took office. It was Joe Biden. It was during his presidency that the pro-Pakistan tilt in US policy returned. Trump had actually, as I said, cut off all security assistance to Pakistan. Biden shifted the Pakistan policy. He helped Pakistan secure the first bailout. And now we are in the second bailout phase. He also provided $450 million upgrade of Pakistan's F-16 fleet to make it more lethal against India. And Equally importantly, in league with China, the Biden administration helped Pakistan exit the FATF gray list. So three critical things happened. India was in no position 2 days ago to block the IMF board from putting a stamp of approval on a staff agreement. But talking about the larger things, history shows that while military operations are undeniably important, political will is the crucial factor for achieving a desired outcome in conflict. As you know, India's economy is 11 times larger than Pakistan's, 11 times larger. And India's military spending is nearly 8 times larger than Pakistan's. But Pakistan has been seeking to offset the power asymmetry with India through greater political will. It looks at India as a weak-willed country that can succumb to its blackmail, that can succumb to nuclear threats, that can actually be pressured by third parties like the US.
But so would you call it succumbing or acting responsibly?
Let me complete, Priya. Just let me complete.
Yes.
Just one line. When history is written, and I say it with a lot of pain, I wouldn't say it. I say it with a lot of pain. When history is written, Operation Sindoor will be seen as only emboldening Pakistan's designs against India.
But sir, India, won't you say, still holds some of the very significant cards? You know, when it sits down for talks, we still haven't revoked the hold that we put on Indus water treaties. We've seen several images of how waters have been withheld and what kind of impact it can have on Pakistan.
Well, Priya, I'm glad you raised that question because there's a lot of misinformation in the Indian media. First, international law is very clear. If one party repeatedly violates the terms of a treaty, or if there's a fundamental change of circumstances, the other party has a right to either suspend or withdraw from the treaty. India has chosen neither to suspend nor withdraw from the treaty. Instead, it has chosen to keep the treaty in abeyance, a term not defined in international law, nor has the Indian government spelled out what keeping a treaty in abeyance means in practice.
But sir, does that not give India the leeway, the elbow room to play around with this? Because then Pakistan cannot deal against India on international fora.
I have been advocating India building riparian leverage against Pakistan for a number of years. I wrote a book advocating how India can build riparian leverage against Pakistan. It has taken India how many decades even to take a small step, keeping the treaty in abeyance, which doesn't mean anything. You know, as I said, keeping the treaty in abeyance means nothing, nor has any water flow to Pakistan been suspended, reduced, nothing. Let's be clear on one thing. India has no hydrological infrastructure on the 3 large rivers reserved for Pakistan to affect river flows to Pakistan. All that has happened recently is that we have done some reservoir flushing of 2 hydroelectric projects. Reservoir flushing is allowed under Indus Waters Treaty. We released more water to Pakistan in the month of May, which is the driest month of the whole year because the monsoon comes starting in June when the river flows rise. So we did Pakistan a favor. Far from reducing water flows, we have released more water by flushing these reservoirs. Of course, when you flush a reservoir, there is a hold up. Then you have to fill up the reservoir. So there is a temporary reduction in flows to Pakistan. But there's so much hype, so much misinformation in the Indian media about what we are doing on the Indus Waters Treaty. We need a separate discussion on that for me to clarify so many technical aspects about this leverage that India can build. If India can build riparian leverage against Pakistan, it will be more powerful, as I've argued, more powerful than the nuclear option.
But there have been meetings between Amit Shah and C.R. Patil, Jal Shakti Minister, where the information came out that not just short-term, medium-term, as well as long-term measures are being looked at. But Patikrit, that brings me to the question: are we over? Are we over?
One point on that, on the meetings. 8 years ago, when the Uri attack happened, we vowed publicly that not a drop of water will flow to Pakistan from the 3 small rivers reserved for India. The 3 small rivers are Ravi, Bias, and Satluj. The Ravi is the smallest river. On your channel, just a few days ago, your reporter was reporting from the border, showing Ravi river waters flowing to Pakistan. Look at the irony of it. These rivers are reserved for India. Punjab is waging water war against Haryana, Haryana against Delhi, Punjab against Rajasthan, and we are letting bonus waters flow to Pakistan as a reward.
So, Patikrit, assertions are made. We heard one from Prime Minister himself saying Bharat ka pani ab Bharat ke liye bahega was what was said. Do you think that tomorrow when we sit on the talks table, Indus Water Treaty is a hand that we might be overplaying?
So, Priya, there's a lot of sweeping statements, but anyways, let me put it this way. I do not think this government lacks political will. I think we have seen enough of pressure from the West, which we have accepted and went ahead. Whether it's about the Russian war and threats that you should never take water. In fact, the S-400 that we used this time, if not extensively, but it was used, there were threats of CAATSA sanctions from United States when we were on the verge of taking it. We defied that and took it. So let me say that to say that the government lacks will, I think it's a misnomer. Secondly, when it comes to the entire Indus Water Treaty, it has been made very clear by the government, whether it is the Indus Water Treaty or declaration of any future act of terror as an act of war. These 2 things are off the table when the conversations will happen. These are not being discussed, and there is no actual formal meetings between India and Pakistan which is going to happen. And that is where there's a lot of misinformation. So far as the Indus Treaty is concerned, let's look at it. Is anybody saying that you completely stop water? There can be a political statement, but it's not possible right now. It will take time, even if it's say 5 to 10 years. You stop 10 to 15% water at the peak of summer, which has only started now. You would see the impact. When the water is being flushed out, which Brahmaji is right, it has a severe impact at the middle of the night. Do you know the impact of the flash flood when it happens? So there are things being done. Let's not presume in one day it will be done. There is a short term, there's a medium term and a long term thing. Whether it impacts Pakistan or not, let Pakistan react by the time of June and July. Let Pakistan decide it when the peak of monsoon comes and all the floodgates will be opened. Let them say that, and then we will decide and discuss whether it actually impacting them or not. So far as the Punjab and Haryana, just give me 10 seconds. Punjab and Haryana issue has been sorted out by the Punjab and Haryana High Court. Look at the directive that has been given to the Punjab government. Do not interfere into the day-to-day activities of that board. It has been sorted out. So we have our own internal challenges. And I think we must give some time to the government of India instead of saying that this has completely, a government without any will. It has shown enough will. It is not easy.
And we'll get an opportunity to show that will, and which also, since we have last 2 minutes left, Mr. Brahmachalani, what do we expect next when one says that, India and Pakistan are going to talk, the ceasefire is a pause, not a pact? What does it really mean? Who is going to talk? What is going to be the agenda? What are they going to talk about and how?
That's a good question. First, Priya, I didn't say that India doesn't have the political will. That was not my argument. I was just saying that Pakistan views India as a weak-willed country. Rightly or wrongly, that's a different thing. But it's important to see, to at least to look at how the enemy is looking at you. That's all I was saying. I know that India has a strong political will, and that's the reason why we launched this operation Sindoor. My only concern is that we terminate this operation before we could actually achieve something tangible. You raise a good question about what comes next. It's important to note that the things that we had in our favor today may not exist if a need arises to relaunch a military operation against Pakistan. For example, the international geopolitical environment was heavily in our favor. The Trump administration publicly supported India's right to defend itself after Pahalgam massacre, as long as India's military retaliation against Pakistan did not escalate to a broader regional war. India had no intention of initiating a full-fledged war. India's purpose, India's goal was limited to inflicting punitive pain on Pakistan. So we had the Trump administration publicly greenlighting India's military reprisals against Pakistan. Then second, we had a national consensus. We had not only a strong public opinion demanding retribution and supporting the government, but for the first time in years now, we had all the political parties on board supporting the government. And when we had the 2019 Balakot airstrike, think of the political divisive discourse we had. This time, there was real national unity. Next time, when next time comes, we don't know if it'll come or if India would be willing to relaunch military operations. We may not have these two factors in our favor.
A lot of that will also hinge on what happens in the next round of negotiations. Last 30 seconds, Patikrit, do you think that with factors like OICs remaining silent, Saudi Arabia standing with India, several Islamic nations also standing with India, and at the same time, China completely pro-Pakistan, US somewhat pro-Pakistan because it is equating victim and perpetrator, how much will that weigh on Pakistan's mind? Does it strengthen its case or does it weaken its case tomorrow onwards?
Pakistan is still literally a country living with begging balls, and it will be even worse for it in times to come. The implosion will continue. The only thing I want to say is this, that you continue to face pressure, and we do not certainly want to be a Pakistan-centric country. And at the same time, I think there is absolutely no lack of will when it comes to taking forward the kinetic actions if the need comes, and it will come. Operation Sindoor is not over. My only thing where I agree with Brahmaji is that when it comes to the strategic communication, I think sometimes, say for example, the IMF thing. Literally, an organization like IMF is a Western proxy. We do not gain anything. This is where the optics come. We should have walked out of IMF that we do not need you. We do not need you, and that is the kind of optical communication which may be good or bad that the world listens. That is the time you said, look, your multilateral institutions have never understood my concern, so I don't need to understand yours. I will be better off myself. As it is, we actually give money to IMF. We don't take anything. We should develop on the other BRIC institutions.
Which is perhaps what India is working on. Sorry, gentlemen, I've completely run out of time. When it says that they're going to send a team to United Nations Security Council with the latest evidence of Pak's complicity. Remember, UNSC is where Pak succeeded in getting Lashkar Proxy TRF's name removed from the resolution that was moved on Pahalgam. Operation Sindoor is continuing. We really hope that it turns out absolutely, completely in India's favor. Thank you, gentlemen, for putting things in perspective. That's all we could pack for you. Thank you for watching.
At Amity, we are committed